10 years of war. 10 more years just to get home. Homer's Odyssey is the reason we still use that word today. Along the way, Odysseus meets a lot of mythical creatures from Greek mythology. A one-eyed cannibal, a witch who turns men into pigs, a monster with 6 heads and a whirlpool that swallows ships whole. Today, we go through the entire journey and break down every mythical creature Odysseus faces in order. If you appreciate me making this type of content, let me know by gently tapping that like button. Let's get into it. Odysseus sails away from the smoking ruins of Troy with 12 ships and roughly 600 men. 9 days of storms push them off course, past the southern tip of Greece, into open water nobody planned to cross. On the 10th day, they spot land. Calm, quiet, inviting. And that's exactly the problem. This island belongs to a people who eat the fruit of the lotus tree. Odysseus sends 3 men to scout it. The locals do them no harm. Instead, they offer food. One bite of the lotus and something changes in a man's mind. Home stops mattering. Family stops mattering. The only thing that matters is staying here, eating more lotus forever. Odysseus has to drag his own men back to the ships in tears. He ties them under the rowing benches so they can't escape again. Then he orders everyone else back on board immediately, before anyone else gets close enough to taste it. So this isn't really a monster with teeth. Nobody dies here. It's something quieter and in a way scarier. A trap built entirely out of comfort. The ships push on, grieved at heart. Land appears again. This time it belongs to the Cyclopes. The Cyclopes are one-eyed giants who live apart from each other high in mountain caves. They plant nothing and plow nothing. Wheat and grapes just grow for them without any work. They answer to no laws, no councils, and no gods. Homer makes a point of saying they hold themselves about Zeus himself. Odysseus and a small group of men enter a cave filled with cheese, milk, and pens of lambs. It belongs to POLYPHEMUS, son of Poseidon, the strongest of all the Cyclopes. And POLYPHEMUS isn't the only kind of Cyclopes in Greek mythology. In older myths before Homer, the Cyclopes were divine blacksmiths who forged Zeus's thunderbolt itself. Homer takes that image and strips away the mythology completely. His Cyclopes aren't skilled craftsmen serving the gods. They're savages who live alone in caves, with no laws and no respect for anyone, not even Zeus. And POLYPHEMUS is the worst of them. And here's where the decision gets made that costs Odysseus almost everything. Instead of grabbing supplies and leaving, Odysseus waits. He wants to meet the owner of the cave and see if a gift comes his way. POLYPHEMUS comes home. He seals the entrance with a boulder so massive that no group of men could ever move it. He spots the strangers but asks no questions. He grabs 2 of them and eats them raw, bones and all. The next morning, he eats 2 more before he leaves to graze his flock. Trapped inside a sealed cave with a man-eating giant, Odysseus comes up with a plan. He offers POLYPHEMUS a skin of strong, undiluted wine. Drunk and pleased, the giant asks for his name, promising a gift in return. Odysseus tells him nobody. Satisfied, POLYPHEMUS falls into a drunken sleep. That's the moment. Odysseus and his men take a wooden stake, sharpened and hardened in the fire, and drive it straight into the giant's single eye. POLYPHEMUS screams. The other Cyclopes rush to his cave, calling out to ask what's wrong. He shouts back that nobody is hurting him. They shrug and walk away. Nobody can't hurt anyone. In the morning, blind and furious, POLYPHEMUS lets his sheep out to graze, running his hands along their backs to check nobody is riding out with them. He never checks underneath. Odysseus and his men escape by clinging to the bellies of the animals. And then Odysseus makes the mistake that follows him for the rest of the poem. As his ship pulls away, he can't resist shouting his real name back at the shore. POLYPHEMUS prays to his father Poseidon for revenge. From that moment on, the god of the sea makes it his personal mission to keep Odysseus away from his home. One boast, 10 more years of suffering because of it. The ships sail on until they reach a floating island wrapped in a wall of solid bronze. This is Aeolia, home of AEOLUS, keeper of the winds. He isn't a god himself. Zeus simply chose him for the job and gave him the power to calm the winds or set them loose at will. He welcomes Odysseus for a full month, feeding him and listening to every detail of the war at Troy. When it's finally time to leave, AEOLUS hands Odysseus a gift. An ox hide bag containing every dangerous wind in the world, tied shut, leaving only the gentle west wind free to guide the ships home. For 9 days it works. On the 10th day, ITHACA comes into view. Odysseus can see smoke rising from his own home. He's close enough to relax, so he does, and falls asleep. His men look at the bag sitting near him and jump to a conclusion. They assume it's treasure Odysseus plans to keep for himself, so they open it. Every trapped wind bursts out at once. The storm drives the ships all the way back to Aeolia, the exact place they started. Odysseus begs Aeolus for help a second time. Aeolus refuses. In his eyes, a man blown backward twice must be cursed by the gods, and he wants nothing more to do with him. So close to home, and it slips away because of one bag opened exactly at the wrong moment. 3 creatures in, and there's an interesting detail worth pointing out. The word Cyclops actually covers 3 different groups in Greek mythology, not just Polyphemus and his kind. There are the skilled ones who forged Zeus's thunderbolt, there are savage ones like Polyphemus living alone with no laws, and there's a third group said to have built the massive stone walls of ancient Mycenae, walls so heavy that later Greeks couldn't imagine ordinary men building them. And Aeolus isn't even a god. Zeus just handed him the job of controlling the winds, which makes the whole disaster with the bag even more personal. Odysseus lost the trust of the one mortal Zeus put in charge of getting him home. The battered fleet leaves Aeolia behind for good this time. 6 days and 6 nights of rowing later, they reach a harbor that looks too perfect. Steep cliffs wrap around it on both sides, and the water inside sits dead calm. 11 of the 12 ships sail in and tie up close together. Odysseus, wary for once, leaves his own ship anchored outside the harbor. This land belongs to the LAESTRYGONIANS, a race of giants descended from Poseidon. Odysseus sends 3 men to scout the area. They meet a young woman fetching water, the daughter of the local king, Antiphates. She points them toward her father's house. Inside, they find the king's wife, a giantess as tall as a mountain. She calls out to her husband. Antiphates arrives, grabs one of the scouting party and eats him on the spot. The other 2 run for their lives, with the entire city chasing after them. Thousands of LAESTRYGONIANS pour out to the cliffs above the harbor. They start hurling boulders down onto the trapped ships below, crushing hull after hull. Men are speared like fish as they try to swim clear. 11 ships are destroyed in minutes. Only Odysseus' ship escapes because it was anchored outside the harbor from the start. Hundreds of men gone in one afternoon. And it happens because a harbor that looked safe turned out to be a trap built entirely out of geography. What's left of the fleet, one ship, sails on to the island of Aea. Smoke rises from somewhere deep in the woods. Aea belongs to Circe, a goddess with deep knowledge of potions and herbs. Odysseus splits his remaining men into 2 groups. One, led by Eurylochus, finds Circe's palace in a clearing, surrounded by wolves and lions that act strangely calm, almost tame. Circe invites the men inside and serves them a feast laced with a magical drug. The moment they eat it, they turn into pigs, keeping their human minds trapped inside the animal bodies. Eurylochus watches from outside the doorway, suspects the trap and refuses to go in. He runs back to warn Odysseus. Odysseus heads for the palace alone to save his men. On the way, the god Hermes stops him and hands him an herb called moly, a plant with a black root and a white flower, said to be too difficult for mortal men to pull from the ground. Hermes tells him exactly what to do. Eat the moly to block Circe's magic, then draw his sword the moment she tries anything. It plays out exactly as Hermes describes. Circe's drug has no effect on him. Stunned, she invites him to bed instead. Odysseus refuses until she swears an oath before the gods that she won't try to harm him. Only then does he agree, and only then does she turn his men back into human beings. It won't be the last time Circe's jealousy reshapes someone into a monster. That story catches up with Odysseus later in the Strait Ahead. Odysseus stays on the island with Circe for a full year. When he's finally ready to leave, Circe gives him a warning that changes the entire shape of his journey. To find his way home, he first has to travel somewhere no living man has ever gone. The Underworld itself. Circe's directions take them to the edge of the world, to a shore wrapped in permanent mist and darkness, home to the Cimmerians. There, Odysseus digs a trench in the ground and performs a ritual meant to summon the dead. He pours milk, honey, wine, and water into the trench, then cuts the throat of 2 sheep and lets the blood drain in. The smell of blood draws the dead toward him from every direction. Thousands of them, desperate for a taste that will let them speak again, if only for a moment. The first Shade to approach is Elpenor, one of his own crew, who died falling drunk off Circe's roof and was left unburied. Elpenor begs Odysseus to return and give him a proper funeral, or his spirit will bring trouble down on the whole crew. Odysseus agrees on the spot. Next comes his own mother, Anticlea, who was still alive when he left for Troy. She tells him she died from grief, simply from missing him for so long. Odysseus tries to hold her. His arms pass straight through since she has no body left to hold. Then the prophet Tiresias arrives and drinks the blood before anyone else gets the chance. He warns Odysseus about Poseidon's anger still burning over Polyphemus. He warns him about a specific danger waiting ahead, the cattle of the sun god Helios, and what happens if anyone touches them. And he warns him that even reaching Ithaca alive won't be the end of his problems. A house full of suitors will be waiting. Odysseus also speaks with Achilles, the greatest warrior of the Trojan War, now a shade among the dead. Achilles tells him something that should sound strange coming from a legendary hero. He'd rather be a poor servant alive on earth than a king ruling over all the dead. Even Agamemnon appears, murdered by his own wife the moment he returned home from Troy. A warning of exactly what can go wrong even after the danger of the sea is behind you. So the underworld doesn't hand Odysseus a monster to fight, it hands him something heavier. The truth about what's waiting for him and the warning that surviving the ocean is only half the battle. Quick thing about the LAESTRYGONIANS before we move on. Ancient historians actually tried to pin down where they lived. Thucydides and Polybius both placed them in Sicily, and interestingly they listed the Cyclopes as living there too, as if the island was Greece's go-to answer for this is where the giants live. Some later writers even linked their name to a real people on Sardinia. What's strange is how little personality the LAESTRYGONIANS get compared to Polyphemus. No cave backstory or dialogue with Odysseus at all. They're just thousands of giants throwing rocks from a cliff. Homer barely lingers on the single deadliest moment in the entire journey before rushing on to Circe. Quick pause before we get into the final stretch because this is where things get genuinely strange. A song that kills, a monster with 6 heads, and a whirlpool that swallows ships whole. If you're enjoying this breakdown, early access to new episodes and exclusive videos about mythical creatures, cryptids and urban legends are up on our Patreon. Links in the description. Alright, let's get back into it. Circe warned him about this stretch before he ever left her island. The ship moves on, and soon a strange, beautiful sound starts drifting across the water. Here's something that surprises most people. Homer never actually describes what the sirens look like. The image everyone has today, a woman with a fish tail, comes from centuries later. In the original Greek myth, the sirens were birds with the heads of women, not creatures of the sea at all. The sirens sit on an island scattered with flowers, and their voices are the most beautiful thing any sailor will ever hear. That beauty is the entire trap. Every man who lands on their shore to listen never leaves again. Circe warned Odysseus about the fields surrounding them. A meadow packed with the bones of everyone who came before, still rotting in the grass. Following Circe's instructions, Odysseus melts down beeswax and seals it into the ears of every man on board. Nobody hears a thing except Odysseus himself, who wants to know what the song actually says. He has his men tie him tightly to the mast and gives them one strict order. No matter what he says, no matter how much he begs, they are not allowed to untie him. The sirens begin to sing as the ship passes. They promise him knowledge of everything that ever happened at Troy and beyond. Odysseus strains against the ropes, desperate to break free and swim toward them. His men only tie him tighter exactly as instructed until the island fades behind them and the song can't reach him anymore. Curiosity survives here. Nobody dies, but only because Odysseus plans for his own weakness in advance and trusts his crew to hold the line even while he's begging them not to. The next stretch of water narrows into a strait so tight that no ship can pass through untouched. On one side waits SCYLLA, on the other CHARYBDIS. SCYLLA lives halfway up a cliff inside a cave no ship has ever sailed close enough to survive. 6 long necks stretch out from her body, each one ending in a head packed with 3 rows of razor teeth. 12 legs hang uselessly from beneath her. She was once a beautiful nymph, before a jealous goddess poisoned the water she bathed in and twisted her into this. That goddess was Circe herself, the same one who once hosted Odysseus, jealous over a lover SCYLLA never even wanted. Across the strait, CHARYBDIS has no shape at all. She's a whirlpool, a curse laid on her by Zeus, forced for eternity to swallow the sea itself and spit it back out 3 times a day. Get caught in that pool, and there's no ship strong enough to break free of it. Circe already told Odysseus the truth about the choice before he arrived. There is no path through here that costs nothing. Steer toward CHARYBDIS and the whirlpool takes the entire ship down, every man aboard. Steer toward SCYLLA and she only reaches out for 6 of them. Odysseus makes the calculated choice. He steers close to SCYLLA's cliff, keeping the whole crew focused on Charybdis' spinning water on the other side. As they pass, SCYLLA's 6 necks shoot down and snatch 6 men straight off the deck, 1 for each head. Their screams call out Odysseus' name as they are carried up toward her cave. Homer calls it the single worst thing Odysseus watches during the entire journey. And this is not because it's the deadliest moment, but because he sees it coming and still has to choose it. What's left of the crew reaches the island of the sun god's sacred cattle. Circe and Tiresias both warned him never to touch them. His starving men do it anyway while he sleeps, and Zeus destroys the ship for it, drowning every man on board. Odysseus alone survives, clinging to a broken plank until the current carries him to one last shore. That shore is the home of the nymph Calypso. Even her name is a warning. Calypso means the one who hides or the one who conceals. True to it, Odysseus disappears from the world for 7 years on her island, and no one back home has any idea if he's alive or dead. So she finds Odysseus washed up and half dead and takes him in. What starts as rescue slowly turns into captivity. Calypso wants Odysseus as a husband and offers him something almost no mortal ever gets the chance to refuse: immortality, if he agrees to stay with her forever. Odysseus says no. 7 years pass on the island, and every single day he sits on the shore staring at the water, grieving for a home he can't reach. At night, he's still expected to share her bed, even though his heart has never left Ithaca. It takes the gods themselves to end it. Athena finally convinces Zeus to intervene, and Zeus sends Hermes down to order Calypso to let him go. Furious, she gives in. Odysseus builds a raft with his own hands, and Calypso sends him off with the tools, the food, and even the wind he needs to finally start heading home. 7 years of paradise, and every single day of it, this is a man planning his escape. Here's the short version of how it all ends. The Phaeacians finally give Odysseus safe passage home, and he lands on Ithaca disguised as an old beggar. His own son, Telemachus, doesn't recognize him until he chooses to reveal himself. His faithful dog, Argos, neglected for 20 years, is the only one who knows him on sight, and dies peacefully right after seeing his master one last time. Inside his own home, over 100 suitors have spent years trying to win his wife Penelope's hand, eating through his food and disrespecting his household. Penelope sets a final test. Whoever can string Odysseus' old bow and shoot an arrow through a row of axe heads gets to marry her. Every suitor fails, some too embarrassed to even try. Then the old beggar steps up, strings the bow with ease, and makes the shot. What follows is a slaughter. Odysseus and Telemachus kill every single suitor in the hall. Penelope still isn't convinced it's really him until he describes the bed he built years ago from a living olive tree, a detail only her real husband could ever know. Only then do they finally reunite. 10 years of war, 10 years of monsters, all of it for this one moment coming home. One thing worth knowing about SCYLLA and Charybdis: Odysseus isn't the first hero to face them. Jason and the Argonauts sailed through the same strait years earlier chasing the Golden Fleece. They only survived because the goddess Hera personally sent help to guide their ship through. Odysseus gets no such help. He just has to pick which monster costs him less. And that choice is still baked into English today. Caught between SCYLLA and Charybdis is a phrase people use for being stuck between two bad options. And that's every mythical creature in the Odyssey in order from the Lotus-Eaters all the way to Calypso's shore. If you want more deep dives like this one, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episode. Thanks for watching, I'll see you in the next one.